Okay, so yeah, today's community call is what we're calling the second pillar, which is structures and systems. So the first pillar we did on our last community call was called foundations, and it was around values, vision, purpose, and agreements, kind of the why, the what, the how of your community, and kind of the foundations of what you're creating, mostly in terms of who you're creating with and what you want to create and how you want to get there and why you want to do it. And from that foundation being kind of strong and having a clear understanding of what you want in your village and the kind of the dream, then it's starting to build structures and systems to actually bring that dream into, tangible 3D reality. So that's really where we're focused on today. And I'm curious, and this is, I want to make this a dialogue as much as possible. So I'm curious, everyone's at different stages of their revillaging journey. Some of us are just curious about it. Some of us are actively looking for it, looking to, become part of one that's already there or looking to start one. Some of us have started. Some of us are in it. Some of us are burnt out by it. There's just these different layers to the journey. And I'm curious with kind of this idea of systems and structures. We've come up with basically three parts of these system and structures. One being governance models, so how we make decisions together. One being financial models, so how do we make money or how do we spend money? How do we deal with money? And accountability models, how do we actually keep people accountable to what they say they're going to do and agreements? And I'll say, in my experience of intentional community, these three things are things that either terrify or frustrate a lot of people. Um, Governance, making collective decision making, it's hard, it takes time. Most people don't like top-down leadership. So a lot of these intentional communities try to be more collective, even if there is some power hierarchy, which is totally fine, by the way. It's just important to acknowledge power dynamics if they are there. And yeah, governance can be really hard. And it can also be something that most people don't want to do. They don't want to be in politics. They don't want to be in leadership positions and all of that. And a lot of people in intentional communities seem to have kind of anti-authoritarian feelings, which for good reason, in our culture, it's easy to not trust the authority. And then financial models, again, just a really triggering thing. Money, people, people dealing with money. It's a really hard thing to work through, like individually, but also with others. It can bring up a lot. And then accountability models, and this kind of is like, how do you actually, you know, have structures to hold people to doing the expectations that are held for the community? And I've definitely encountered that a lot in my experience co-facilitating a community of about 40 people. There's a lot of people don't do what they say they're going to do. And it's really hard to be kind of the leader or the mom or dad and be telling people constantly, okay, you're not doing this thing. Why are you not doing this thing? And, people can get triggered by that. And so these three things, while they are kind of the most charged pieces, are actually crucial. And I'm learning that the hard way. I'm 4 years into a community. Some of these pieces were there, but not strong enough. And now we're really seeing the ripples of that and how hard everyday life has become because we didn't really figure out a solid financial model. We didn't really figure out a solid accountability model. And we've been playing around with different, we still haven't fully committed for government model. So these are all things that we really want to explore and feel into, and they can change as you go, but it feels important to really sink into these concepts before, getting into the next layers of community, which are also really important, but more about social cohesion um, and ritual and all of that. So, with all that said, I'm curious if anyone has experience in any kind of intentional community governance models. They've kind of done collective decision making, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in an intentional community. It could be in a nonprofit or whatever it is.
Mhm.
And what your experience of that has been.
Mhm. Well, I recently moved on from a small business that I ran, which was kind of run like a small family. There was 10 to 15 people in the collective, and we often had to make decisions together and make plans as a whole, as teams. I tried to encourage a more roundtable decision making, and accountability was a big part of the model that we used. Um, Tried to stay away from the top-down decision making. Um, but I think I had all the exact same struggles that you're having in your community, Jasper. You know, I think that's just the human condition. Um, but that was really valuable experience, and I would say that very good experience for what we're heading into now together. I think there's a softer place we're coming from,
Mm,
but not dreamy. It's just more patient, slower, um, more deliberate, maybe too. Like I hear you when you're saying, "Oh man, I wish I would have got the governance right," or whatever. Like those agreements. I can see like having them on paper, and like everyone's signing with blood. Like just really like whatever you can do to make that accountability very real and something to honor.
mm,
Um, you know, uh, anyway, uh, we're just starting our group meetings with Wildhaven here, and
mm.
yeah, it's really fluffy. It's just for fun and connection right now. I can't wait to get in the nitty gritty, but we'll keep you posted.
Awesome. Thanks for
There's
sharing.
there's so many examples that other communities have already built. It's
Mm,
not like you have to start from scratch.
totally.
And people are so willing to share their
Mm,
models because they're
mm.
proud of them because they think they're working. So here's the biggest challenge I see, because most of these properties are not bought by a group of people. They're bought by one person who has the money.
Right.
And then they get stuck in well, I paid for it, so I should be in charge of making all the final decisions. And that
Mm,
is really complicated to how to deal with the founder, or I don't want to say founder, but the person whose money went to securing the land, and then they have to give up authority. I just had that experience down here where a friend of mine said, "Well, I paid for it all, and what do you mean I'm going to have to ask permission from a group to do things?"
mhm,
Very sensitive, and it's
mhm.
problematic, and I don't know how to get around that unless you have a founder or a person who puts the money up who says, "All right, I'm doing this as my contribution. What's your contribution? What's your contribution?" And then they feel like they haven't done it all by themselves. Like everybody's contributed to, maybe not as meaningfully financially, but at least they put in other forms of capital
Right.
to equate the
Mhm.
Right.
situation. Otherwise, we got a top-down kind of potential, which none of us we're all running away from.
Yeah.
For me, uh, because like uh, that's exactly the situation we have here. Is I bought the land 20 years ago. It has all the zoning and everything. I've been planning this for 20 years, or holding space for it. I haven't had time for it at all, but now I do. Um, but I feel deeply into what Brad is saying. Like I feel like I need to give up ownership 100%. Like
Mm,
I feel like the only way forward and it's just really in my heart. I feel like I need to donate it
Mm,
to a
Your trust,
nonprofit.
maybe a trust.
Mm.
In Canada, there's various systems. I'm learning. There's some participation of people's thing or something like that. Anyway,
mhm,
like I'm I'm enthused that Canada has such things. I can't even believe it. But like I feel like that is the next step.
mm, mhm,
And can I make a suggestion? Because in a way, you've made a capital contribution to the entity, and perhaps that can be separated from the governance structure. Okay,
mhm,
I'm titled to the land. If the land ever gets sold, I get my money back plus some percentage that feels appropriate, and then you cede the governance to a group.
mhm,
You know, maybe there's an opportunity to hold your title without completely surrendering it.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I would also agree on that, because in a capitalistic system, that's how usually, by investing initially, they take shares, and then those shares like stay forever, and then there's like lots of tension between people, and they kind of, you need sometimes to let the thing kind of live itself, develop itself. That's what I like believe, and
mm,
maybe some balance between uh, this the structure, like the focus, and sometimes just like let that happen, let the people sort out,
mm,
socialize between each other. That's how the wisdom, that's how the collective intelligence like happen, like this round table and decentralized decision making. And I also, I don't know if you guys know, there's this spiral dynamics book.
mm,
That's a very interesting theory. I really recommend reading about that. It's called Spiral Dynamics, and it tells about like those power systems. Basically, like there are spirals of power systems. Some people call it like psychosocial DNA, and how they were formed. And the most basic form is like when people try to survive, and there's no governance, and there's no complexity in decision making at all. Like those who are at survival, they just grab things, like,
mm,
or attack
mhm,
or grab. And then
mhm,
eventually, like, when people say, okay, but maybe we can do things smarter way, what can we do? And the next level, when they come to the tribe, and with the tribe they start to fulfill each other needs. For example, somebody's hunting, somebody's fishing, and stuff like that, and there is like a different level type of governance. So, and then the model goes like forward in such a way that eventually, like, people in the tribe can get bored with the same system, and then they say, hey, we want to conquer, we want to go out there to a forest, because like the same rules, the same stuff, the same culture, nothing changes. And then it goes like all of those spirals, they have actually like their own colors. It's an interesting model. It's one of the models, so there are multiple theories, and you don't have to believe 100% any of the theories, but it's nice to have some reference. And I think this one allows to understand those power structures quite clearly.
mm,
It depends on the culture. This thing can be applied to a culture, to a group of people, or to the whole country. You can see, for example, authoritarian countries, they operate like top down, and like there it's no questioning like up. But some other countries, there is more like, let's talk about things, let's use more of collective decision making and collective like wisdom and so on. And so that's something that I wanted to share as to how you say, like, how do we decide what kind of power
mhm,
structure to operate. Sometimes you have to take the context into account, and
mhm,
the people that you work with.
mhm,
For sure.
mhm.
Definitely.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you. Cool template, and I can imagine how it cycles, and yeah, just like thinking about how we interact with all the different parts. I definitely noticed as I mature as a person and into community, it's like there's no one right way, and everything that we push away, all the resistance, leadership, money, all that stuff we're trying to run
Yeah.
away from is actually really important to integrate if we want
Yeah,
to be successful.
exactly.
Because we're in a world that operates in those systems. So it's,
Yeah,
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 you
and
can't run away from it.
and you can also see that, like with this green layer, for example, if there are some villages out there, like some, hippie like people set it up, but you don't see it like prosper. You don't see like it
Right.
grow
Right.
because they don't utilize the
Yeah.
entrepreneurship in there,
Yeah. Yeah.
for
And
example.
organization in general.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so like the idea is to be like whole and to understand that. And also this
Yeah.
capitalism, for example, I believe that most of Western society right now operates on this, like, let's get more money or whatever. But what I think that villages should do, they should integrate that as an economical foundation in order
Yeah.
to operate with the
Yeah.
outside world. So this
Yeah.
capitalistic world is quite brutal, like, because because it's a hard value. You exchange hard value. That means like
Yeah.
you give something and then you receive something, and then like you don't owe anything. So like
Mhm.
the deal is done and you can like completely be separate and nobody owes anything. But with the how would I say, with like living beings, with humans, for example, how we also do things and how we are supposed to do things more is by building the trust, and that's the
Yeah.
soft value.
Yeah.
And what I think is that the village should set up the economical like area inside where they can decide on their own prices, or
Yeah.
sometimes they can do work with each other either for free because they trust each other so much that they like each other, they love helping. You know this feeling when you love helping someone because you like that person. But if some stranger will ask you, for example, like that you don't know, for of course you wouldn't say like so easily like yes, I'll help you, whatever. So, and the village should harness this economic power, which is like different, the dynamics is different than outside world. But for outside world, that's where you would have the entrepreneurship, and you should motivate people to set up
Mhm.
entrepreneurship, and
Mhm.
probably have some mentors or have some elders in the village that will say, oh, you like to do this thing, let's help you set up the business. You'll just do your thing and I'll help you set up the bureaucracy, automate it as much as possible, and start like selling stuff to the like outside world, to the cities. And that's where like the energy will come in to buy more materials.
Totally. Totally. Well, we'll come back to that kind of concept, the financial stuff, in a moment. I want to stick to the governance models real quick and kind of finish here and just being aware of time. So in my experience with my community, we've mostly focused on consensus decision making models, which is time consuming. Luckily, there's not too many of us in the leadership position. And we do have power dynamics in terms of who owns land and who doesn't. And I think there's really cool ways you can do that. I actually want to transition to a co-op model where you can start to, everyone invests, through money into shares, or they invest through work, like sweat equity into shares. That's one way. But consensus decision making, everyone has to agree on these things. You have to be willing to compromise. It can be a really good way to like have a lot of voices, but it also can be too much if there's too many people in the room. Which is why you can kind of start to work with like representatives and that kind of thing, which is kind of how we work where I live. But one of the ones that I know is the most successful is Sociocracy. And I don't know, I haven't done too much practice myself, but Abby has. So Abby, could you share a little bit about Sociocracy and your experience with it?
Yeah, so I haven't actually experienced a consensus decision making personally, so I can't speak from that. But during the sociocracy course that I took by Dana Leaf Christian online, she specifically gears it towards intentional communities, and she discusses like the difference is that consensus is kind of built to be really inflexible and take a lot of time to change things, but sociocracy is built in a way to be able to modify proposals and craft new ones more efficiently. So it allows the organization and the community to evolve with time as needed, without so much barriers. And people are also more interested usually to try something new using Sociocracy, because they can trust that if a decision is implemented and it's not working, that it will be easy to change. So it gives people more flexibility as well to compromise. And there's also kind of an air of consent-based decision making. So like you don't have to be super excited about something, but you know, you can consent, versus in consensus, I believe like you can block and you can do things like that. But in Sociocracy, you're kind of bound to certain expectations. So for instance, like every circle has domain and aims that they are meant to abide by. So I live in a community home where there's a lot of renters, and so we're part of like the resident circle. And so our domain is like we can make decisions about the home that would last up to 2 years, and you know, not things necessarily related to like building, that would be for the homeowner circle, but we can make decisions within our domain. And so if somebody has a suggestion, like for instance, I'm like, hey, I think we should you know, change the design of the living room. What does everyone think about that? If somebody in the circle said like, no, I don't like that, they're not allowed to say that. They have to say, oh, I don't like that because that would impact negatively something that we've decided as a circle that we're meant to protect. So, oh, that would impact the flow of traffic and how many people we can sit. So I'm not going to, you have to give a valid reason based on the circle and based on what you're meant to do. So people can't just have like personality conflicts and like block decision making progress. So that's worked quite well for us, especially having like a separate circle for the homeowners where they can make certain decisions. But now I'm moving into a role where I'm becoming the resident representative. So in a meeting with the homeowners, I will come in and basically be a voice of the residents, and then the homeowners can make decisions, and I actually have a vote on that circle to make decisions. They actually have to consult me, and that's a way for, even though I haven't bought in with any money, but I've given a lot of my time and I'm much more involved energetically, and I'm familiar with Sociocracy, so I've taken on this role of being a representative, which helps create more equality for all the residents who may or may not be able to show up for those meetings, while also ensuring that like the homeowners aren't maybe separated from like the day-to-day experience of life when they're just like, oh, but I own the home and I have this decision about how I want to raise the rent or whatever. There's a bit more equality. And so that's the cool thing about Sociocracy, is it's not necessarily, like Jasper said, like hierarchies aren't bad, but minimizing hierarchies and the ethos around Sociocracy is the people who do the work make the decisions about the work that's being done. So if you look at like the world and society, like if the way our governments are run, our municipalities, our corporations, if the people doing the work made the decisions about the work that they were doing, we would have so much more flexible organizations. We'd be able to evolve and adapt so much quicker. There would be so much more equality. There wouldn't be this huge wealth divides. Like, so I really see empowering people and teaching people these skills and this governance is like such a mental shift, but it's like so important for people to start thinking as a collective instead of like really rich people being in their rich circles and then being really disconnected from like the regular average man. And we're not operating as like a global community. We're operating as like adversaries, and that energy can show up as well in your community when you do have someone who comes in who's like 70 years old and has like worked in the oil sands their entire life and has like, you know, $100,000 of savings to put into the home, but their voice isn't more important than someone like me who's just coming in and just wants to help and just loves community. They have more decision-making rights about the home, things like that. But at the end of the day, at the table where we all sit down together, like they don't have a right to talk over me or dismiss my ideas just because of their position. And that's something for Herding Cats, which is the community I'm part of. That was baked into the very foundation of this community. The people who started it are Sociocracy trainers, And so they believed foundationally it's important to say sociocracy is our governance model, and it's also kind of the ethos of code of ethics of what we want to abide by. So when one of the people who's, you know, bought into the community and has founded the community starts to act in opposition to those values, it's very easy to say, hey, you agreed to use sociocracy in this collaboration, you agreed to this. So even though you might have this tendency to take charge and manage people and tell people what to do, that's not what you can do here. We have to actually draw you back, and they have the opportunity and hopefully the capacity to say like, oh wow, like I do want to be a better leader and be more cooperative, and I want to learn, so please teach me. Like they have to have the humility instead of being like, oh, I started a community and I know. And sociocracy helps us do that, have a structure built so that anybody who might have this tendency to abuse their power, even unintentionally, it's very easy to hold them accountable and to say, hey, like that's not what you agreed to, and maybe it didn't look like how you expected it to look, but you know, this is what we need to kind of come back to. So yeah, that's kind of my experience in sociocracy.
Thanks,
That
Abby.
sounds like a cultural immune system against power capturing.
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah,
Okay.
Abby, I read the why, what, and how mission statement of herding cats in it, and sociocracy and what you're talking through here really pervades through that.
Definitely.
It's nice.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really lucky to be part of a community that says solid about that, because that was super important for me. So
Congrats.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Brad, did you want to say something? It looked like you were...
you know, our nature in this civilization, we've been taught self-reliance. Very few of us actually build structures of teams. I've been doing it for 30 years, putting on events, and I probably use a version of sociocracy where I have people running certain areas, marketing and production and programming, and those people, based on merit, you know, they rise to their where their voice matters most, because they're the people putting in the most time. And as long as everybody feels heard, it usually works. I'm not a benevolent dictator in my work. I built community structures, but more on a membership level, and not. I haven't done a land project yet. I'm still trying to get there. But I do believe sociocracy is probably one of the best guidelines to follow, whether you adapt a version of it or you go by the book, because some of it's a little stringent, but it's the best organizing structure that I've seen, where a consensus will just take you down, you know, long hours of debates, and not everybody's ever going to be happy. But what I started with was this nature of self-reliance. We've not really understood what it means to be, unless we've been fortunate enough to be in a structure that works. Most people resist any kind of authority or any kind of decision making where they don't feel like they have the authority to decide their own life. And you know, again, it's a trust. It requires years of conversation, years of trust building, and it doesn't happen overnight. But you know, this is the challenge, that most of these communities fail because they implode around this decision-making process. So it's the big elephant in the room in terms of decision. How do we decide which system to use? How do we decide how to make collective decisions or financial decisions? And if you don't get it right, you're doomed.
Yeah.
Dark.
Agreed. Dark but true for sure.
Long meetings and never getting
Yeah, you definitely learn that one quick. And I often think about the Martin Luther King quote. I don't remember it word for word, but something around you know, the forces of good need to organize as well as the forces of evil, because as we see all these like institutions and things we're trying to get away from or change, these like megalithic governmental kind of ancient systems, they're really well organized. Like, they're not well organized in the sense that, you know, they're doing the best things, but they're well organized in the sense that they're actually getting stuff done. Or corporations, you know, like they're exploiting the earth, but they're doing it efficiently. And so we need,
they are rigid, they are long lasting, they're rigid, but also that's their drawback, because they're
totally
so hard to change, so slow, like
totally. And it's like David and Goliath, you know, we got to be agile, we got to use the fact that we are, you know, able to change and be flexible to our advantage. But organization is something that I find across the board intentional communities aren't very good at. And if we can figure that out, like Sociocracy is a great example of, like, it's been really templated and really, like, there's courses on it, and that's amazing. And like Brad was saying earlier, we don't have to reinvent the wheel with all of this. People have been doing this for, you know, a long time, trying to figure out these different models. And there's also a lot of people who have put their life's work into creating ways of sharing it. And so there's something around like finding those templates and then adapting it to your specific needs of your community, but making sure that the organization is clearly outlined and agreed upon is huge. And so just to end off with the governance structures, you know, Sociocracy definitely feels like the one that I see the most and seems to be the most successful. So certainly worth researching more into if you don't know much about it and you're looking to make decisions as a team. One that came out of that specifically for social enterprise or business is Holacracy, basically Sociocracy for businesses. I know a few kind of humane tech people that I'm connected with use this. And then there's different forms of cooperative governance through co-ops and nonprofits that exist. But again, that's not specifically for intentional community, but it could be adapted depending on how you're operating, you know, as a land trust or a co-op or shared title. You know, there's like those basic structures of the actual legal zoning and land is going to affect how you make decisions. And then you can make it a hybrid. You can have various versions of that together. So that all said, that could be a whole, you know, book in itself, just finding out what governance system you're in. But I want to kind of still, while we still have some time, talk about financial models and accountability models. And financial models is interesting because, you know, for example, my intentional community, and I think quite a few I've been to, there isn't any kind of like business being run, but everybody is kind of responsible for their own finances. So everybody has to make their own money or have their own money. And then the community and everything that happens here on the land is kind of just separate. But then I've been to other communities, especially the more successful, long-lasting ones, where like they have a retreat center built in that makes money for the community, and people in the community work at the retreat center or they work at the kitchen. And there's this kind of like regenerative flow of capital coming in and then feeding people, and then they get paid and they go out and can spend money. And I've also seen communities like religious communities that I've been connected through Revillager that, you know, they create basically a nonprofit, they get funding, they give people money, nobody has to pay to be there, nobody has to pay for food. So there's like lots of ways you can do that. But for us, like our only real financial structure is members' contributions. So we have a basic fund that everybody pitches into monthly. It acts like a strata or a membership fee, and that goes towards land projects and such. But everything else falls on the landowners, which I'm one of. And so that's one. Another way to do it is through crowdfunding. You know, if you're looking to start a project, you can definitely use crowdfunding. Cooperative financing is, you know, all about, okay, we have 8 people or even more, 12, 18. We want to buy land together. I definitely suggest co-ops. Like getting more than five people on a title is a nightmare, at least in Canada. We have 4 people on a title on the property part of the community we're on, and it's already difficult. So co-ops actually allow for, you know, financial income. You can definitely get grants or donations if you set up as a nonprofit. Shared income ventures. So this is where I'm curious to open it up. So when we're talking about a community that actually acts as a social enterprise, and this is where we get back into the kind of entrepreneurship model, I'm curious if anyone has experience with that has felt successful. I'm looking for kind of the positive angles of this, because I've definitely seen some failures, but like how to bring money into the community so that the community can then, just be a fountain of, being able to grow the food, being able to maybe pay people to do the work, maybe being able to, fix things and actually level up the infrastructure. Because right now it seems pretty tricky, especially legally, where I am at least, in terms of running a business and being on land where the zoning isn't quite ready for that. So we have events here, but we're not allowed to be a retreat center and run a business here, but we do. So it's kind of in this gray zone. And I'm curious if any of you have experience or have thoughts or excitements about ways in which we can bring financial abundance into intentional communities.
Well, that dance hall that I talked about that we built, it's still in the finishing stages, but it is intended to hold workshops, and not just for ecstatic dance. I mean, that's going to be Friday nights for sure, but there's going to be retreats of various natures. There's an industrial kitchen in there. There's a full workshop to repair and create. We have a wood mill on site as well for milling our own wood. So we fully intend to have a regenerative flow of capital coming in, and people that live here will be part of that. And the people that are interested are that seems what they're very keen on. They actually like the idea of creating workshops, education, bringing people from the outside of the community in and somehow influencing them in a conscious way.
Totally. Yeah, that's a great model for sure. You're muted again, bro.
I don't personally have experience yet, but I'm looking forward to do that. But here in Finland, there was one project that tried to build one smart village, and what they did, as in one of way for raising capital, there was one person who created, I don't know what is it called, like in Canadian law, but is it like cooperative type of company?
Cooperative.
Yeah, cooperative, and took a loan with a good interest rate, and then like was intended to build houses with that money. So then people would move in and start paying the rent, and with that rent paying off the loan over like whatever 20 years. You like calculated everything. That way to build like houses, because you need to build housing in order to invite people if you want people to stay on site. Otherwise they will just have to travel, so you have to solve the housing like somehow.
I'm going to have to leave in just a couple minutes, but the community that I will have someday would operate like this. We're like an incubator. Okay, we want to encourage entrepreneurship within the community. Nobody has got normal jobs that usually come to live in these contexts. They're left their professional track, and now they're looking for a different kind of work relationship. People have amazing gifts, but they need support. So the model that I've envisioned is that, say someone has an idea for a business inside the context. This is a community that might be a little more established, but someone has an idea and you say, great, we want you to do it. We even have a little seed money. We're going to put $10,000 for you to build this business. People in the community will help you, and you'll tide back, you'll give back profits or revenue sharing to the community over time. You still own your own business that you're creating, but the community benefits from the money you make. And maybe there's a model where that is a win-win for everybody.
Oh, I like that.
That's
So we're like an incubator, right? We're saying, yeah, let's encourage this entrepreneurship. You know, you like putting on events, great. You host the events and give 40%, 30%, 20% back to the community for the money you make, for instance. That's just, again, those are things that someone might do separately. Like I make tinctures and lotions, and I'm going to sell them online. Okay, well, we'll give you the space. We'll give you a little capital. People will help you if they're available, and if you profit, you tide it back to the community. So I really
It's a really
appreciate you
nice
doing this,
model.
Jasper. Thank you. I got to
Yeah,
run,
thank you, Brad.
and let's
Great
catch up
to-
next week. Okay, thanks. Nice to meet everybody.
Sounds
Well,
Good
good.
luck
Brad.
good luck on your community paths.
Thanks, Brad.
You too.
It's made easy. If it were easy, a lot more people would be doing it.
100%.
Blessings.
Hi.
Doesn't Brad.
Did I have time to share, or did we want to?
Please share.
Yeah, I'm good for another 10, 15 minutes.
This is a little bit different, but I just wanted to mention it because it's fairly interesting. So, here, part of Herding Cats is sociocracy, and another big part is inspired by Charles Eisenstein's vision, sacred economics, that kind of model. So, they're developing the legal structure as an entity for this home. I think it's going to be a cooperative of some sort. People own shares and whatnot. But so far, like, one of the owners had about, let's say, half the mortgage paid. And then another investor / now owner came in and kind of finished off the mortgage. So in just a couple years, the mortgage is going to be paid off. And so what that allows is now that money that's going to paying off the mortgage, like, they're still going to have fees for the house and stuff, but a good half of the rent money they collect is going to be able to start to be saved in a separate account. And so because the ethos of these two founders of this community is such, they've decided to create in the legal entity of this home that their ownership would decay over time, just in sacred economics model. So, they have a certain amount of money, let's say like $100,000 invested, and over the course of their lifetime, as they grow older, that their ownership will decrease and that money will go into the community. And eventually, when it's time for them to pass on, the community will own their shares, and they won't necessarily be able to sell it or like pass it on to their children. It will be part of the community. So it's kind of this long-term trajectory of, like, as the community is here longer and longer, the community owns itself and now is also living in a home that's completely paid off, that has no interest in everything. So that money can go into making the home better, or it could go into helping stimulate, interest in this as a community, or starting new homes. It could be investment seed money to buy new homes and develop more community homes nearby. So I really like that model because it shows kind of that selflessness of the founders of, like, we want to do things differently. We don't want to just say, I made all this money and I'm going to have it forever. We want to actually acknowledge that, like, as I grow old, my gift is to give to the community in the next generation that's going to be benefiting from living in this home.
Hey, Abby, can I ask you a question on that, please? So yeah, I love that model. That's so cool. And I love Charles Eisenstein. Was that you that posted this little quote today on Revillager app?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I love him so much. Anyway, I just wanted to question, so the owner that's aging, okay, his or her ownership will decay over time, kind of like a reverse mortgage idea. I love the selflessness that you speak about around that. That's like really feels good in my heart. I'm just wondering, like, what's the reciprocity there for them other than just feeling good?
Like, what do they get from letting their ownership decay?
Yeah.
Well, I think the purpose, and like the purpose of this community home in general, is to seed a different type of consciousness on the earth, right? So Like that's what sacred economics
Mhm.
really is. It's saying like the current money system we have is based on degeneration, it's based on limitless growth and wealth. It's not based on nature, and it's therefore not sustainable in the long term. But what is sustainable is trying out these models that treat capital more like it's a natural substance that decays. And so it's like what they're getting is the fact that they're giving their life to see this kind of energetic that's in a central place like Calgary that can help to spread this awareness of like, you don't have to just get a bunch of money, then build a bunch of walls, and then sit in your fancy house and then die and it goes to the bank or it goes to the government or it goes to your kids. Like you can live your whole life, you know, loved and in community. And then when your time to pass on, like your legacy is your community. And
Wow.
I think a lot of people would find that really fulfilling. And I know the community that we have here now, like the owners are deeply nourished by the experience of living in community instead of like living in an isolated place all alone and, you know, being older. They're around people who are younger and there's, yeah, and it's more about kind of that long-term trajectory of like, what's the next 100 years look like? Like after I'm dead, you know, what is the world going to look like and what impact did we
Legacy, investing
like,
into
yeah.
legacy. I actually have an idea of what could be reciprocated to such an investor is that I really like this idea that the person invests into the place, into the dynamics that starts like to flourish instead of like this usually, oh, like I own 50%, maybe I can take later 50% of the village. No, that's not, we don't do that. But instead, what could be done is that as people age over time, and as you said, for example, in Western societies, that's like a very widespread like phenomena. Like elderly people live in their own apartments and everybody is like separate. And then like they watch TVs, like what kind of life is that? That's not how humans are supposed to live. But so what instead could be done, maybe created some sort of, as you invest into place, so it's a place, right? So you make it beautiful, you make it nice, you make it like there are trees around, there's gardens, there is like sauna, there is like well-being, full well-being system basically built in place. All the supplements, all the vitamins, whatever, all the herbs that people might need, and that they get some sort of a ticket that they are always welcome there as maybe as a citizen, maybe as a guest, or maybe they can stay indefinitely, whatever, for their initial like seeding, and they birth that community, they help that community to organize itself or
Got a little break in there.
resources so the community can reciprocate. Questions maybe not so, but how is it, does it work now? It's working.
It's working. We lost like 30 seconds there.
Okay, yeah, so in a nutshell, some sort of like allowing the services also, like maybe give a discount for that person for the web shops that the community, for example, owns, or the well-being services or housing, affordable housing, something like that in the future. It doesn't have to be like quantified right away, usually like by percentage amount, but you know, something like that.
Well, the one question I do kind of have is, you know, like the one person I mentioned who's bought in and helped pay off the mortgage, he's 70 years old. And so, you know, at a certain point, like his mobility will change and he might need like a lot of care. And often like what people do is they have a home and then when they can't live in anymore, they sell the home and they use that money to pay for like living in like an old folks home. And then that's where they kind of grow old. And that's very expensive. So the one question is like, yeah, as people come and go here, they might not have like lived here super long. Like, how would we maybe caretake that elder as he grows? Would that be responsibility of the community to take care of him because of his investment, because of the money and the time he put in the past, and now he needs more care? But I think it's important to at least start to move in that direction, because I think, yeah, like that process of growing older, like it needs to not be insulated from us. Like I visit my grandmother in her home and then I like go away and I don't see her for another couple of years. Like I think it's really beautiful that elderly people can live with their families and to live surrounded by people of different ages and to be connected to life instead of kind of put away from society somewhere separate. So I don't know how that's going to look, but I think we'll probably figure that out as a community with a similar, you know, ethos that the rest of this is built on. But yeah, there's still definitely questions and blank spots.
Thanks, Ab.
Yeah, thanks for sharing on that. Yeah, it's a fascinating topic, and I think it's really important to explore and to get curious with and to experiment with. And you know, I've been really curious about ways in which, you know, investors, social impact investors, microfinancing can kind of start to help, because I find there's so many people who want to do this and have the energy for it and just don't have the capital. And therefore they don't have the land, and therefore they can't start the community. So there has to be this kind of matchmaking, similar to how most corporations work, where there's some people with money and capital who aren't going to necessarily live there, but are willing to, you know, invest into this community idea. And, you know, in corporations, generally that's, as you were sharing, like kind of about getting your investment back, usually increasing the investment. Whereas this would have to be a different model. So, you know, Charles Eisenstein's great for that. And I'm curious to see, as this, you know, movement continues, what kind of, yeah, in practice models we can find. And something I'm really curious about too, there's actually been quite a bit of movement in the blockchain space around that stuff, creating investment channels for digital currencies, cryptocurrencies, in which people can start to, yeah, create their own organizations called DAOs and start to create investment crowdfunding. And then it's all written into the code so that you can't have corruption on the human level. So yeah, it's really interesting. I'm curious to see what the next 10 years, especially with AI, starts to unfold with all of that. But we are about 10 minutes over one, where I am anyways. And so we should probably wrap up. It's been about an hour since we started getting into things, and we didn't really get too much into accountability models, but I think it's another piece of governance and another piece of just the social coherence of any community, is how to keep each other on track. And the only things I'll say about accountability models that feel really important is that in any intentional community I've seen that it's successful, transparency is massive. Transparency of finances, transparency of decisions, transparency of expectations, all of that. Clear communication, really direct, clear communication. And that can be reinforced over time because miscommunications are very natural. Trust among members is going to be huge. And trust takes time to build. It's not like everyone just trusts each other. You know, in some ways, it's not good to just like trust everyone 1,000,000% right away. Like there has to be this building of relationships to create trust, but trust is key to pretty much everything else that is going to be needed to work for the community. So things that actually build trust are really important: workshops and practices and celebrations and such to build trust. And the values and goals of the community, and how to actually like create clear codes of conduct, make sure you have regular meetings and check-ins, make sure there's roles and responsibilities so people feel empowered and autonomous in their place in the community. Having like accountability buddies. We do this in different support groups I'm in. You know, having someone who's like, you two are checking in on each other at the very least, and checking in on how you're doing on things, and making sure that there's feedback loops so that like people are actually getting back to you. And I've seen this a lot in businesses where like there's like people in charge of a team, and then someone's in charge of these teams, and they're feedbacking, and kind of like Sociocracy, it's like interlocked circles of teams. And I think that works really well in terms of accountability, because you can start to see like, okay, this person isn't doing good. Well, why are they not doing good? It doesn't have to be like everybody has to take responsibility for this person. It's like someone is there to catch that, give feedback. And then of course you need to have kind of like clear consequences set out, which is something that I think is also very hard for communities, of what happens when this person does not stay accountable again and again and again. You know, at what point is it that we're trying to heal and trying to give feedback and trying to grow, and at what point is it that this just isn't a fit? and how do you go about with that process of kind of unweaving, if you're willing to go through that. I mean, some people are like, nope, we're not letting anyone go, we're going to make sure that everyone's here. But in other senses, it can be quite toxic to keep certain people in, if they're not aligned with the value and the vision and the agreements. So all that said, we're going to talk next community call about social cohesion, and that's a really amazing, fun topic. Communication, conflict resolution, you know, how we actually connect with each other as social, emotional beings, and how we keep that wellness in the community through all of these big pieces. So that all said, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate your voices, your ideas, and I look forward to connecting more. You can definitely go on to the Revillager Collective to chat more about these things. There's actually community conversations already happening on some of these topics. But anything you want to share there is amazing. And then again, if you're using the app, please let's get in contact. Feel free to email me or Abby, and we can set up a call. Also, if you just want to chat, we can call about anything. So yeah, thanks so much. Again, I'm Jasper and Abby here. We're from the Revillager team. We really appreciate your time and your energy. And yeah, any last words?
Thank you so much for this. It's really, really helpful. And I can't wait to do more.
Thank you for this. Oh, amazing. Inspiring.
You're cutting out again. Oh, I think you're good.
I heard a thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thanks for
you're
coming.
so welcome.
Very, very useful. Very good.
Awesome. Well, yeah, best of luck on the journey, and we'll be in connection soon.
Perfect. See you.
Okay. Bye, everybody. Have a great day.